we lived to fight many, many more days after that day. But it's like sometimes you need someone else when bad things happen, right? Sometimes you need someone else to get back up again and to just give you a slightly different perspective. But it's only the end of the story if you say it's the end of the story.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Radical Hospitality Show. Today, we are joined by Sarah Dusek. Sarah is an entrepreneur, investor, a hospitality builder who has spent her career reimagining how and where people experience the outdoor world. She's the co-founder of Under Canvas, one of the premier, really largest luxury glamping in the United States, and has helped grow it to a leading outdoor hospitality brand before exiting the company. Today, she's the co-founder and managing partner of Enigma Ventures, an investment fund backing women-led business in Southern and Eastern Africa. And she's building a new travel brand called Few and Far, focused on extraordinary transformational travel experiences. Sarah is also the author of Thinking Big, a pitch deck formula for women who want to change the world, where she's helping founders communicate their visions and raise capital with confidence. She sits at the intersection of hospitality, impact, and investment. We're excited to dive into all these things and think about how to build brands, empower entrepreneurs, and really just changing the way of travel. So, Sarah, welcome to the Radical Hospitality Show.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
No, our pleasure. Like I said before the show, I really enjoyed diving into your book and learning more about your work. You guys are doing some incredible things. So really looking forward to this conversation. Thought we'd start out. You have worn like several hats across this world of hospitality, from founder, CEO, investor, now creator of a new travel brand. When someone asks you, what do you do? How do you answer that today, Sarah?
Nobody likes that question very much, right? Because most of us wear many hats, right? I mean, I'm also a wife and a mom and a friend and a spiritual seeker and so many other things. So it's a tough one because at any moment in time, I am wearing a different hat, fulfilling a different role.
I love it. So maybe if you could just take us back to the beginning when you guys first started getting into hospitality, what brought your life into this world?
Yeah, well, I always say that I am an accidental hotelier, in that I had started my career working for nonprofits, and I spent about a decade working for various different aid organizations, and I lived overseas. So I, for almost a decade, had spent time trying to save the world from a nonprofit perspective. And so, really, who I am is still someone who's very passionate about making a difference in the world, wanting to drive change, solve big problems, and create solutions to big systemic issues. And I, after 10 years of that work, found myself demoralized, disillusioned, distressed, and burned out. And went back to the drawing board and figured, is there another way? Like, is there a different way for me to contribute and solve big problems and create solutions for things? And could my effort and energies be better harnessed in a different way? And I started to really play around with this idea of, could business be a vehicle for driving change and doing good? And this was a long time ago now. And it was before sort of B Corps were a thing, or impact businesses, or impact investing, or social entrepreneurship. None of those sort of buzzwords were a thing at the time. And I just started to explore them and started to realize that business is such an extraordinary opportunity for making a difference in a community, in a neighborhood, in a city, in a nation. And actually the very heart of a business is that it's trying to solve a very specific problem. And those problems can be little or they can be big, but effectively problem solving is really what business is all about. And ideally doing it sustainably in a way that you have to create profit. Otherwise the business is not going to be able to continue. And so we started to really reflect and think about the concept of being in business for a greater good, and started to explore how we might embark on a business journey. So that was, sort of a long-winded way of saying I came to the glamping world. Well, that didn't exist either when we started either. Serendipitously, really, because we were on our own journey of exploration, looking for our own sense of purpose and meaning. and trying to wrestle with sort of big questions that we were asking ourselves at the time.
So when you look back at finding your way into this hospitality world, what made that different from what you were doing before, whether that was in nonprofit? I think defining what is the real problem and then coming up with a solution. So I assume hospitality met in there somewhere for you guys.
Yeah, it
What
did.
did you see as the
We
problem and
we
how
were
did you
kind of,
solve
yeah, when we came up with the idea for sort of a tinted camp concept, we were trying to solve our own very specific problem, which was our first attempt at social entrepreneurship, which we had attempted in the UK, had failed. The business concept didn't fail, but the environment in which we were trying to do it caused it to fail. So the great financial crash rolled around in 2007 and 2008 and wiped our first perfectly great business out.
it?
But it meant we had to go back to the drawing board, re-envisage, what we might do next. And my husband and I found ourselves, we decided, we picked ourselves up with a 6-month-old baby and said, well, let's head back to Montana and live on my husband's farm for a while with his family. We'll lay low and we'll figure out what we're going to do next.
All right, guys, I've got one quick favor to ask. If you've been enjoying Radical Hospitality, if these conversations have inspired you, encouraged you, or helped you think bigger about what it means to create spaces that truly serve people, would you hit the subscribe button? It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference for our show and for our team. We're working hard to bring some of the most thoughtful entrepreneurs, builders, and visionaries in hospitality, people creating meaningful spaces all over the world. And your subscription helps us keep getting better every single week. And if you're someone who's dreaming about building a hospitality project of your own, that's what we do at Root Architecture every single day. We help clients design and bring those spaces to life. You can book a discovery call with me or someone on our team at therootteam.com. Thanks so much for being a part of this journey. It really means a lot to me. Subscribe, stay with us, and let's keep building cool stuff that serve people well.
And we started to think about the land and creating access. His parents were farmers and ranchers, still are farmers and ranchers in the northern part of Montana, near the Canadian border. And when I went out there for the first time, I remember thinking, wow, this landscape's so extraordinary. I mean, it's vast and empty, but there's lots of wildlife and it's very beautiful. And gosh, this is an extraordinary big space. And it reminded me a lot of my early days in Africa. And we started to wrestle with the question, could you create access to places without having to develop them in a bricks and mortar kind of way? Could we think more light footprint than that? And could we create access to the outdoors for people who would never normally think about coming to the outdoors? And we knew nothing about running hotels at that moment in time, but we're very inspired by how powerful and extraordinary nature was. And at the same time, we were wrestling with, well, how are we going to earn a living off the land? And here we are, and what can we do with what we've got to try and earn a living? And eventually came up with this idea of, could we create a light footprinted hotel? Could sort of a temporary style hotel that you could pick up and take down without any kind of footprint left on the land? And could you develop in a way that you didn't destroy what you were wanting to create access to? So it was sort of the very beginning of a long journey into experimenting, into creating access to the outdoors for people.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine we interviewed a few weeks ago, was talking about development on land and how we often come in and we see something beautiful and we just build right on top of it. Yeah.
Bulldoze it. Yeah.
And it's like, you should really think about building adjacent to what he calls the magic, and how do we get access to that magical places without destroying what we came to admire and appreciate?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's done with tents, maybe it's bricks and mortar that are pulled back a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but it's being thoughtful, isn't it, about how do we not harm the land that we want to appreciate? Like, how do we do something in a way that's impactful to it and not impacting it in a negative way? And we know green spaces are so powerful. We know nature is is so good for our health, our physical health, our mental health. We know how soothing design can be, or how jarring it can be, and the difference between living in a concrete jungle and living in green space or wild space. I mean, it's an extraordinary different thing. And so when we're contemplating how do we create beautiful spaces, or how do we create access to something that's already beautiful, less is definitely more, in my opinion, and being thoughtful about how and why we do that is pretty critical.
Yeah. So, what were some of the early operational challenges of the practical when you get in and start doing this in a way that takes
Yeah.
that idea and then turns it into reality?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we built our business around using canvas wall tents. And, obviously, wind is the nemesis of tents. So, figuring out how to get tent structures to stand up to, you know, crazy amounts of wind was a fairly severe learning curve in the beginning. And of course, then things like toilets and running water and sewage systems. And I definitely know more about systems than any normal person would like to know. And it's those kind of things, right? The practicalities of like how does this become functional and operational in a way that makes sense?
I was watching the earthquake that happened in on Mount Everest. There's a Netflix on it last night, and it happened in 2015. Basically, base camp, they've set up what is really a fully functional city now
Yeah,
of tents. There's all these practicality things of sewage and waste and food to deliver, mountains moving and winds and structure. At one point they had a horrific earthquake that basically took out base camp and a lot of the village below. And I was reading through your book that morning and talking, and it reminded me of the scene in the book where the wind came through and took down one of
yeah.
your campgrounds. And just, how, when you went through that, how did you guys deal with that and react and rebuild, and what changed that you learned from going through that?
I cried, Zeke. I cried a lot. I cried like a baby. Yeah, it was the first season. So we had sort of been in the tented space for about 3 years before we finally figured out our business model that became ultimately under canvas. And we set up in Yellowstone in 2012. So it was sort of the first year of our tented hotels outside of national parks, effectively. And this was version one. And we were not horrifically professional. We were not, we didn't have everything buttoned up, and the design of everything, and everything wasn't super windproof. And, it really was tents in a field. And today it is far from tents in a field, but at that moment in time, it was definitely tents in a field. We, one afternoon, the weather in the mountains in Yellowstone is pretty severe. It can be like an 85-degree day and then a 32-degree night. I mean, you can have 50, 60-degree temperature change in one day. And typically you'll see a thunderstorm roll around, or a snowstorm, maybe a roll around in the summer, quite violently. And this one day, a huge storm rolled in around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And you could see it coming. It was one of those storms where it's just black, and you can just see the blackness moving towards you. So we had the sort of the sense to sort of warn everybody, and rushed around the camp and said everybody must get in their cars. Nobody's allowed to stay in their tent. You need to be in a hard structure. There's a big storm coming, and when it passes, everybody better go back. Either go to the restaurant down the road or sit in your car and wait it out. So everyone was, evacuated. And I was living on site at the time in our camper van, and had two small children, one who was 3.5 and the other one who was 9 months old. And I was there by myself, and we got and I remember sitting in that camper, and the thing was shaking, like it was rocking, like you could feel the wind. And I was scared. I was really scared. And I remember thinking to myself, should I stay? Like, do I need to get out? Like, I was thinking, do I need to like hustle my children into my arms and like try and get to the car? And I figured, no, just like stay sheltered. And this probably went on for a good hour. I mean, it probably wasn't But it wasn't longer than that, 45 minutes to an hour, but it felt like, an eternity. And I remember when the wind had stopped and it kind of it had passed through, we'd kind of, gone through the eye of the storm. I opened the camper door. My maintenance man came in to check on me and said, are you all right? And I just looked behind him, and the whole camp had literally been flattened to the ground. I mean, it was leveled, like the whole place was leveled. And I was beside myself. I burst into tears. And I just thought, that's it. It's over. It's done. Like, we just had a monumental thing happen and come through, and it's game over. Thankfully, it wasn't. It wasn't game over, but it was, it was soul destroying. It was awful.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted you to tell this story a little bit, because I think so many of us entrepreneurs go through this part of the journey of like trying and then feeling like it gets wiped out by a
Something
hurricane.
happens.
And it's like, it happens. Our first hotel, we had it all permitted and ready to go. And, the week we were going to pull permits, the government shut down with COVID. All of that investment, just investors pulled out and it's done.
Yeah, it's over. Yeah, building a hotel right now. Yeah.
And so it's not really, about are you going to get hit, but you are, but it's how you get up and keep moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah. I've since learned that I still need to have a good cry when that happens. And sometimes I need to cry for 5 minutes, and sometimes I need to cry for 24 hours. Um, but I have to put a time limit on myself of how long I'm going to feel sorry for myself. Because then I got to hustle, right? Then I got to find a way to pick myself back up and get going again. And for that particular incident in Yellowstone, I remember calling my husband and saying to him, "We're done. It's over." Like, I was doom gloom, like our lives just ended again. And we'd already been through the great financial crash. We lost everything. Our first business, was a disaster because of the great financial crash. So we'd already had sort of like one catastrophic business disaster in our portfolio. And here I was sort of staring down another one thinking, well, we can't come back from this. I mean, like, you can't be a hotel and, suddenly there's no place to sleep. And I remember the maintenance guy, he said to me, "Give me the phone." I'm on the phone with my husband, like having a little pity party. And my husband's on the other end going, "Okay, love. Okay. All right." Like he was like soling himself with like, "Okay, this is how it is." And my maintenance guy said to me, "Give me the phone." He took the phone out from my hands, gave me this kind of strange, like, "Get yourself together, woman, look." And he said to my husband, "It's not that bad. It's okay. We can put this back together. We've got this." And I
Not
was like,
dead yet.
I haven't got this. But he was like, "Yeah, come on." And we called everybody we knew to come and help us. And even some of our guests helped us put the camp back together. And by about 11 o'clock that night, we had everybody back in bed, clean bedding. Everybody had a roof back over their heads. And not one person asked me for a refund. I mean, which was a miracle. And it wasn't the end. I mean, and we lived to fight many, many more days after that day. But it's like sometimes you need someone else when bad things happen, right? Sometimes you need someone else to get back up again and to just give you a slightly different perspective that yes, sometimes things are definitely going to hit the fan and it's definitely not going to be very pretty. But it's only the end of the story if you say it's the end of the story, right? And that's the one thing I have learned over the years, that often I'm ready to say it's the end of the story. And someone else will say to me, "No, no, you're just in the middle. You're at that moment in the movie." Where it's horrible, but it's like this cataclysmic moment. It's like, in storytelling and story writing, they say that, those moments are the hinge of the arc of a story. And they're the moments where the heroes get to prove themselves, and the story turns itself around, and the hero is vanquished, or overcomes, or conquers, or something. And sometimes we mistake those moments for like when we're actually in the middle of our own story and we think we're at the end of our story, and it's like, you're not at the end of the story until you say you're at the end of the story.
Yeah. I think that's why we love movies so much. I think they remind us
Exactly.
of
They've
the
got that
world that we're
tension. There's moments of tension.
in. Yeah. It lets us know, like, hey, this is not the end.
Yeah.
And thank goodness you guys decided it wasn't the end.
Well, thank goodness I had someone else who had some sense standing alongside me that day.
You do need that. Certainly, I know there's many days my wife has picked me up when I thought I'm done and told me to get back at it.
Come on, get out there. Yeah, absolutely. We're not done yet. We're not beaten yet.
Well, we've got a lot of ground to cover, but I definitely want to look at how that then went from a tent city that's getting blown down by winds and leveled to how do you go from that to a glamping company that's become one of the most influential glamping companies in the country and then exits to 100 million. There's a lot that happens between here and there. So maybe just kind of start to how did you pick up from that? How does that begin to scale as a scalable company for us that are in the entrepreneur world? Like, what are those steps that begin to happen from there?
Yeah. Well, a couple of major decisions happened between that moment and the end of the Under Canvas story. My role in the Under Canvas story, I guess.
And we would spend the whole hour talking about this, but you have so
We
much more to
could,
cover. So
we
I want
could
to, I want to
spend
get you, I want to
spend a
hear
whole
this
hour.
piece.
And maybe that's a good reason for people to pick up my book, because my book Thinking Bigger really documents the whole Under Canvas journey, and some of the monumental sort of aha moments that sort of happened through that 10-year journey of growing and scaling. Um, One of the things that happened that year was I realized I needed someone who knew how to operate. So we made a critical hire after that summer who could really help us organize and execute on running a hotel the way a hotel should be run. So that was a fairly monumental decision. And then the second one was really about thinking about scale. And we realized that summer that we had the opportunity, we had a scalable model. Like we had the inkling of an idea of a business model that could be scalable, and that we could not only just open sort of one tented hotel outside of a national park, that we could have many. And so I started to work on that idea of how do we make that happen. And my first next sort of big step was hiring someone else to come and help us sort of think about our operations as we thought about, okay, what might our next project be? And my husband started to work on how do you make tents stand up in the wind and solve that problem. So I liken being in business to really just understanding the key problem at any moment in time. And if you can understand what the critical question is at any moment in time, you can work on finding a solution to that question. And that really was probably one of the pivotal moments for setting us on the path to building and growing and scaling a big company.
Yeah. We say in architecture, half the solution is coming up with a well-defined problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's understanding the problem you're trying to solve for, right? And then you can zero in on focusing that. And my experience of being in business is that business is solving one problem after another, after another, after another. And you really gotta love problem solving. And if you love problem solving, then being in business is a great career choice, because being in business is basically constant problem solving.
So curious on a couple of pieces in there on the scalability. So one, getting the right team and people, so you're not doing everything yourself. Two, you said you had a scalable model. What was the pieces that made what you guys were doing scalable from both systems, financials, land? How did that
I definitely
work?
didn't have a scalable model on that particular day. But what I guess I mean is I could imagine a business model, um, or a way for us to operate that could be scalable. So I could imagine, hey, we could create a tented hotel outside of national parks across the country. Undercam has been executing on that for the last 15 years. And so, that was an idea. We had the concept of, creating a tented hotel, and then realized, okay, how would we execute on that, and what would our strategy be, and how possible would it be to pull that off? So Yeah, and not every business is scalable. Not every business should be scaled. I think that's worth bearing in mind. But at the same
What
time,
makes a good scalable business? What do you know, I'm an architect and I can't get out of my way as the bottleneck. So I'm deciding I'm trying to do something else. But, what do you think are the components that make a good scalable business?
I think there's something about the essence of being scalable is about having a repeatable model. Like having something that you can do over and over and over and over again. That really is at the essence what scaling really is, right? I mean, if we take something like extraordinary like Amazon, for example, I mean, Amazon basically was an online book retailer, right? And they scaled by figuring out ways to sell more and more books online, and then realized, well, we could actually sell everything online, not just books. So their scalable model became creating an engine, a platform that allowed them to sell things online and allowed all sorts of people to be able to list things for sale on their site. So, most of us, most business ideas never start out with like what the end is going to look like, but effectively we're building in some way to create expansion, to create opportunity for growth, and building that into the DNA at the very beginning. McDonald's, I mean, is a totally different example, right? But you've got one hamburger joint, or you could have a million hamburger joints. But here's the core essence of what our hamburger joint looks like. Here's what this model looks like. And so, is there something repeatable um, and replicable that we can do again and again and again and again that helps us drive some scale?
Yeah. So that happened with Under Canvas.
Good. Yeah.
You figured out how to scale that system. Were you guys purchasing real estate or would you lease the land?
Yeah. No, we were purchasing real estate. Yeah, we were.
So every time you would have to raise capital for the land, the tents, that business component. You kind of had a model that you knew that would make some would work, some wouldn't. Um,
They all worked,
they
Zeke.
all worked. Oh, perfect.
They didn't.
What were some of the key things that you began to look at, for acquisition that important for any hospitality owner that they should be thinking about?
I mean, it's totally different depending on what your business model is, right? There's no one answer to that, because what's right for one business versus right for another business is they don't have to be the same at all. So it really depends what you are building and why. And people ask me that question all the time, but there's no right answer to it, because it depends what your business model is. If my business model had been, I don't know, selling hot dogs to 5,000 people every day, my business model should be, okay, we'll create a little food truck slash hotel slash restaurant right outside a bowl field or something, right? Go go where people want hot dogs, and then look for land that would make the most sense for doing that. So land and location really depends on your own personal strategy. And I think what I see a lot of in this space is people not having a clear strategy and just thinking because it's worked for someone else, it should work for me. And that isn't true, sadly, because what a lot gets lost in identity, right? If you have no identity, your business has no identity, your consumer's going to see you've got no identity, and it'll be really, really hard for them to want to engage. So, however beautiful a place you've created. So, having core sort of concepts that make your place, that are definable and that people could recognize, and that are, and it could be a million different things, but it's unique to creating a sense of this is your place and here's the identity. I mean, it's just like there are millions of people in the world, right? And no kid ever looks the same. It's like, because they're your children, like it's your baby. It's got your sort of fingerprints all over it. And if you have your more kids, then your fingerprints all over them too. And so it's like and business is the same. It's like, what is your fingerprint? What is your formula?
Yeah. I think that's beautiful, to not approach, especially when we're talking the hospitality world of, trying to do everything that, as a copy. I think, we're made unique. So, but there are other people that are similar to ourselves. And I think, ourselves is a good place to start to
Well,
say,
100%. And we built for our family, right? We built for us and what worked for us and what we liked and what we were passionate about. And we was always allowed dogs under canvas locations, right? Because we were dog people and we had dogs, and we had small children. So like we built places that would work for families with dogs and small children. So I think there's a lot to that. Is like, who are your customers? Like, who are you trying to serve? If it's people like you, create a place that you want to be and you want to go, because there's plenty like to more people like you. But it's like that sense of understand your own identity and understand, what's important for you.
and I think I know plenty of, young couples that love urban environments that are completely different. I think one of the reasons like I love what you guys are doing is we have similarities. We have boys that are similar age. We love the outdoors. We also have dogs. And it's funny you mentioned those. We talk a lot about being able to go and travel to places. And it is one of the key hard areas is to
It's not
leave with your
dogs.
dogs.
Yeah.
That's an issue. My wife's in the middle of trying to get another puppy. And I'm like, okay, but it needs to be a travelable
It's
puppy.
traveling hard. Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a
Yeah.
great, opportunity to have a solution for in hospitality, if you're dog people for dogs. But if you're surf people, having a place, I remember one of my favorite hotels is Loge up in Westport. And I, went there and it's so easy. You walk in, they've got, wetsuits ready to go, a surfboard. And, that is a unique identity and experience that's created around a certain person type. And so figuring out
Very
like,
much.
what are
Yeah,
those things that resonate with you, resonate with people, and creating those is the infinite opportunity that we have as dreamers.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
So I am super curious, fast forwarding here and move into what you guys are doing now with Few and Far. And what is this opportunity and who are you guys now creating that for?
Well, now we are a family with two teenage boys. We are creating spaces for families of all ages, really, but tackling the challenge of taking young people on outdoor adventures around the world. And so we've got a two-pronged business model in that we have effectively a travel agency taking families and people on extraordinary trips around the world, doing out to wild places. Our speciality is taking people to places in the outdoors around the world with a special focus on Africa. So that's been near and dear to my heart for a very, very long time. And we are building and creating extraordinary places to stay in the wild. So we opened our first lodge down in South Africa at the very end of 2024. So we've been open about 15 months now, called Few and Far Lavondo. And it is an extraordinary reserve set in about 100,000 hectares of extraordinary wilderness with incredible wildlife. And our guests can hike and bike and swim in waterfalls and climb through gorges and watch rhino while you have lunch. And we just in the business of creating extraordinary experiences, either on our property or helping other people travel and have extraordinary experiences, because that's what I want to do with my kids when I travel. And we want to save the planet. So we are that project. We are actively got a carbon project underway, seeking to sequester about 60,000 tons of carbon a year from the restoration work that we do on that mountain, and hoping to do more projects like that.
Wow. That just sounds, I'm coming to visit. That sounds like
Yay!
an incredible project. What brought you guys to South Africa? Like why?
Yeah, when we sold Under Canvas, I stepped down as CEO very, very beginning of 2020. And we had already decided sort of many years earlier that if and when we ever did sell Under Canvas, we would take our family on an adventure. Africa had inspired so much for us both. I mean, the idea of a tented hotel came from Africa, and I had spent my early years working for aid agencies in Africa. So we decided to return with the family and to have an adventure together. And so we moved down there and set up life for a while, and obviously then COVID rolled around, changed all of our lives forever. But we've spent an amazing number of years down there working with entrepreneurs. I ended up writing my book to help other entrepreneurs think about growing and scaling, just because I know how powerful business can be at changing not only our own lives, but so many other stakeholder lives, including our customers and our communities. So that was one of the reasons I ended up writing Thinking Bigger, was to help other entrepreneurs. And I was doing a lot of work with helping female entrepreneurs in Africa grow and scale their businesses. And then we felt the itch and the scratch to be creative again, and discovered this extraordinary wilderness area that is literally the size of Singapore. I mean, it's enormous. It's 100,000 hectares, and it wasn't under any protections. And we realized this is critical habitat, and we have to protect it. We have to make sure this becomes nature reserve, and ideally we create access to it and create extraordinary places to stay and ways to experience it. So we started that work back in 2021.
Wow. And so did you guys, to create the reserve, is that a special process? Is that something
Yes,
that
it is.
you're
It
working
is a
in?
very long process. And thankfully, working in partnership with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, who are leading the charge on getting all those acres put into nature reserve. I think we're up at about 35,000 hectares this year. Of the 100 will now be in nature reserve. So we got a few more tens of thousands to go, but we're making good progress on that. But that's the whole idea, is that ultimately you connect it all up and create one large reserve.
And what occurs when you make it a reserve versus it just being private property? What's the difference?
You basically agree to signing up for looking after it and protecting it in particular ways. So you're agreeing to land management principles and behaviors and treatment of the land, and thinking about how you utilize it and what you don't do on it and what you do on it. And that's largely it. Yeah. So you effectively restrict yourself, but you ensure effectively forevermore that even if you do sell it, that it's preserved and protected forever, because it's now in a nature reserve.
And what are the access plans and development plans that you guys intend on
Yeah,
doing on the property?
we opened our lodge, as I said, about 15 months ago, and it's super small at this moment with just 6 suites, and you have your own private guide to help you explore this extraordinary mountain range, and you can sleep out under the stars, you can track leopard on foot, you can just literally knock yourself out with so many extraordinary things to do. It's an amazing, amazing place. I liken it a bit to like the story of Narnia, of when Lucy steps through the wardrobe and into a completely different world. And our reserve feels a bit like that you step into a completely different world. And it's a mountain range, and it's been largely sort of unexplored and uninhabited. So it's a pretty wild, extraordinary place.
Yeah. What does this business model look like different than previous ones? I imagine, when you're doing under canvas, there's a financial strain of this has to, make capital right away. And I imagine you guys are probably in a different position on this. Is the goal on this similar, where you were trying to create a financial model that's self-sustainable?
Yep.
All those things are still
Yeah.
in play. This isn't just
All those things are still in play. I mean, I have talked for years about what I call the triple bottom line. And even under Canvas, our staff would tell you that I will harp on all the time about having sort of 3 legs of one stool, sort of people, planet, and profit. And that you ideally hold all 3 of those legs of the stool in parallel with each other. They're all level, they balance with each other. And if one of them's out of whack, probably going to have a problem somewhere down the road. So those 3 things are still really important for us. People are still really important. Our community around us, our employees, our guests are our people, our stakeholders are our people, and the planet is an active participant on our balance sheet, and profit. No business can really last unless it has the potential to become profitable in time, short period of time.
Yeah. When you see this in 10 years, what do you see few and far being?
That's a great question. I have a very clear idea in my mind in that I hope that we have put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hectares of land into conservation and into protection, and that we've created extraordinary lodges creating access to that wilderness. We have this big goal of sequestering 1 million tons of carbon a year through all the restoration work that we do in wild places. But I'm imagining there will be more than one, few and far, but all of them will be anchored in some kind of conservation initiative. But that we've created extraordinary places to recreate and to explore and to experience, and have designed amazing locations for people to visit.
Yeah. And they still have a light footprint. They look like the canvas lodge has evolved a little bit. Really beautiful structures. Are you guys designing and building these yourself now? Do you work with architects? What is the process
Yeah,
for
we
you?
did. We definitely worked with architects on our first project for Few and Far, for sure. My husband has always been sort of our in-house design guy, but he always works with engineers and architects to keep him on the straight and narrow. And, this project was really extraordinary because what we discovered was that most people in Africa were building safari lodges using hardwood from the Amazon. The Amazon is quite a long way from South Africa. And even if it was sustainably produced, that didn't make any sense to me. And so we ended up using an invasive species to South Africa, which is eucalyptus, a lot of which needed to be removed from our reserve, and some of which we utilized that was grown sustainably locally, and figured out a formula of how to heat treat it to get it to behave exactly like Brazilian hardwood, effectively. So we created a sort of a new wood product for the South African market, manufactured all the wood for our lodge right there on site in our own little factory, and spent a year producing the wood for it, created jobs, and at the same time used a local sustainable product from right there.
Love that. Is that literally a product now that you can purchase? Yeah.
Yeah, it's being sold and distributed across Southern Africa.
How cool is that? Again, solving problems and finding
Yeah,
solutions, great
exactly.
business.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. And so you mentioned like when you came here that you began to work with some of the local businesses and particularly women. Love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing through it's Enigma Ventures, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
how did
Yeah.
that start? What are you doing with that?
Yeah, we created a fund to invest in female entrepreneurs. One of the things I realized being a female entrepreneur myself was that it was pretty hard to raise capital. And so one of the things I wanted to do post selling a company was help other women grow and scale their businesses. And I'm a massive believer that actually business is a great solution to economic disparity, and actually is a great way to build a nation. I think America is an extraordinary example of that economically. I think one of the things I still am very, very proud of America is this sense of the American dream and the ability to, we created an economy through an economy of entrepreneurs, and people who've built small businesses really are the backbone of any economy. And I was very passionate to see how the development world, which was the background I came from, could be intertwined with building businesses and building small businesses that had the potential for scale. And so we put a small fund together to invest and mentor and educate and champion and open doors for extraordinary women building amazing companies and help them grow and scale. So Africa's extraordinary because there's no lack of talent. I think Africa has the highest percentage of people with PhDs on the planet. I mean, more Africans have PhDs than you could shake a stick at. I mean, it's ridiculous. And yet Africa is so woefully underinvested in, and it shows because it takes capital to make capital, right? So one of the things we wanted to do was see if we could make a difference by investing and supporting and championing other women to grow and scale businesses.
So do you have, I'd love to hear about maybe like one or two of the
Yeah,
stories
we
you've been able
invested
to
in
invest
dozens.
in and what kind of impact that's been having.
Yeah, I mean, we invested in across sort of sectors, but all into things that we thought were scalable, that had some possibility for scale, from either from fintech, like fintech opportunities for businesses that had the potential to be able to serve a million people, food, regenerative farming, and creating branded products, to education. We have several education investments in the online tech space, all sorts of, we've got some AI in the mix too. So yeah, a really diverse set of folks that we've invested in, but an amazing variety of projects that are amazing businesses that started small that are growing wildly.
I love that. Is it just for women in Africa, or is there other
It's,
locations y'all would? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. We're involved in Central America and have a lot of our staff down there.
amazing.
I would love to have a mentor like you for some of our, we have some really amazing mothers that are architects that
No,
are engaged in our company. And I think they have some big dreams as well. So
like there's a great book that you can put in their hands.
I will be sending everyone a copy of this. It really is a fantastic book. And I know it's geared towards women. I'm taking a lot from it myself as well. So it's a very wonderful book. Yeah. So you moved from building this own company and to being an investor. What surprised you most about sitting across the table doing this investment? Is this different than actually
Yeah,
being on the grounds?
it's really different. And I actually realized it's a bit like being a grandparent, I think. Like you've had your own children, they've grown up, and now you are the parent to the grown up child who's now got their own baby, their own child. And investing is a little bit like, you can give your advice and you can share your wisdom and your experience. But at the end of the day, you have to let the parent their own child. And being an investor is kind of like that. You kind of give your advice, but you have to stand back and let them grow their own company. So because it's their company, it's not your company. So as an entrepreneur myself, I found that really hard. And it now gives me sort of appreciation for all grandparents out there, because it's probably really hard to watch your own child making mistakes. You know the end to already, and if they just did X, Y, and Z, that child would be so much better off. But anyway, I mean, we all have to learn the hard way, I think, sometimes. But yeah, it's hard to sit on the sidelines. I loved it because, and I do love it because the opportunity for impacting and sharing, spreading yourself more widely than just what you can do is very possible through investing and mentoring. But I also realized I really love being in the ring. I really love being an entrepreneur. And I think that's probably one of the things that drew us back to the idea of building another travel company. It was just the very real sense of, I really love creating things. I love solving problems, and I love the daily challenges of having to figure things out and make things happen, and learning things you have not learned before and figuring out how to do those things. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like
I it,
building for your niche and your people. As an architect, I really love focusing on entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
Because I'm one myself. We're always building and creating new things. I like being in the game. That's where we're building a hotel. But I love sitting across other people who have their big dream. These are the things that they're wanting to do. Some of those, again, having worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, you kind of know, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Should try XYZ, but again, not the expert in all of them. And we're just learning as well. You kind of gave the cheat sheet with your book of here's some of the things that you recommend and are looking for people who are listening on the podcast. What are the things that you're paying attention to beyond just the numbers that are in this idea of a pitch deck, which we had to create ourselves as well? So it was our first experience, but what do y'all
Yeah.
pay attention to?
I mean, at the end of the day, people invest in people, right? So, I mean, it's one of the reasons there's so much disparity in the world, because we tend to invest in people like us. We tend to invest in things we can understand. And we tend to have silos, which, we see the world through. And sadly, most of the world's wealth is held in a very small percentage of certain people's hands. And so, another reason I wrote that book was to help share the inside scoop on what some of the rules are for capital, because not enough of us appreciate or understand these are the rules of money. Like this is how this works. This is what people look. These are the sort of the financial margins and metrics that people are looking for. And if you don't understand that, it's hard to show up in the right way. But I think ultimately investing is about it's less about finding this sort of unicorn idea. It's more about finding people who can execute, who have a great solid vision, dream that definitely stands up to being poked a little bit, and that feels robust. But at the same time, investing is really about investing in people. And so I look for people who I think can execute all day long, because people can talk a good talk, but can you actually make things happen? How are you going to solve big problems? How are you going to overcome challenges? Because you're going to have challenges thrown at you left, right, and center. So I'm looking for how you've done that in the past. I'm looking for, like, what do I think you're capable of? Do I like you? I mean, that's a big deal. And it should be a big deal for the person on the other side of the table too. It's just like a job interview, right? Do you like this person? Do you want to go to work for them every single day? Like, it's a bit like a same deal with, dating. Like, do you want to sleep in the same bed with them at night? Like, because really this is what this is. So
a deep relationship.
It's a relationship, exactly. So that's part of the sort of the process. But trying to sort of figure out how you connect, how you could deliver financial returns, how you could execute. A lot of people think that if they just had the money, everything would then be fine. And no one's going to give you the money if you already don't have a really great strategy. You can't come up with strategy after you've got money. You have to kind of had strategy and figured it out and shown that I'm ready to execute on that.
I've always looked at money as just being an amplifier. There's been places in my business where I just didn't want more money because I didn't know. I was like, if I scale this, I'm scaling bigger problems. I don't want any more of these. I need to figure it out first.
It's not always a good idea.
I'd rather scale something that's not going to have bigger problems than knowing that money's not always going to fix that.
Money and money doesn't fix most problems. And sometimes having too much money is a we've seen some of the glamping companies that have failed over the last few years. Is like sometimes too much money was the problem, right? Because you never really solved some of the really critical fundamental problems in your foundations. And just like when you build a building, right? If you don't have good foundations, the building's not going to be a very good building. And companies are like that too. So money's hard to come by. Money's hard to raise. Figuring out creative solutions around all of that is really the difference between people who can and people who don't. And yes, the world is not an even playing field. It's not. But figuring out how to navigate your way through that and utilizing resources that are at your disposal is really, really critical, I think.
Yeah. So if I'm a hospitality entrepreneur wanting to scale and grow my business, what advice do you have for somebody that's in that right now? And what steps should they be doing besides, well, maybe it is investing.
They should read my book. Read book.
And all answers come back, but it really is a great book. So I will agree with that.
I mean, and that's really why I wrote it, because that's the question I get asked all the time. And I'm like, all of the wisdom I have is in that book, and every question I've ever wrestled with and every problem I've ever encountered is in there. And what I have discovered, I mean, that book's been out for a couple of years now, but what I have discovered since is that people have read that book and read their own problem. Like they've found their own story on those pages. And I obviously didn't write about their story. I wrote about my story. But people have discovered where they are at on the journey and found themselves in the pages and have used it a bit like a map to help them navigate to the next phase of their journey, to the next pain point or the next problem that has to be solved. And it's helped figure out where you are and what you need to do next. And I don't say that just because I wrote it, but we all need to understand what are the challenges that we are facing and what is holding us back, and focus all of our energy on solving that problem. And so part of the question is answering your own question and asking your own question with, where are you stuck and what is holding you back? And what have you got to do to get yourself unstuck, to get yourself to the next level? Sometimes we all need a little bit of help with that, a little bit of perspective. Which is why we started this conversation, which was, and I am not immune to that either. I still need outside counsel and someone to pick me up off the floor occasionally, and someone to help tell me where I'm at in my story, tell me what's going on, and help me reorientate myself so that I can go on and solve the next problem.
Yeah. What's the biggest or most exciting problem you're working on solving right now?
Sales. And I really love sales. What I am discovering though is we had a very specific sales journey with how we sold room nights at Under Canvas, and selling and taking people on trips and taking people out to Africa is a very different sales challenge than it is to book a night at a national park hotel. So figuring out how to solve and learn how to sell in that space is a new learning curve that I am figuring out and learning how to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it all individuals or do you take groups there? What's kind of the focus?
Yeah, both individuals and small groups. We have a couple of retreats coming up in May, one that I am leading in May, which I still have, I think, at least one spot left for, and another one in June, which we have a couple of spots left for. So, so small groups. And
have you done any business, hospitality, entrepreneurial groups to come down, see how you guys are doing it?
I've had, not per se, I've had several YPO groups, sort of leadership type stuff, forum type programs come and stay with us. So sort of people use us as a place to think bigger, solve, take a step back from their everyday lives, do some leadership reflection, listen, contemplate. Yeah, that we do that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with all you're going, and the work that you're helping, it seems like it would be a, wonderful place to be a fly on the wall and, listen in. Yeah. If people want to, so many places and things, but let's say they want to get engaged in, applying for Enigma, if they want to, come and visit, like where do you send everybody? Is there a particular area?
Yes. Well, two places. If people want to find out more about Few and Far, they can head over to our website, Few and Far. We've got two websites, fewandfarlavondo.com, which is LUVHONDO, Lavondo, Few and Far, all spelt out. Lavondo, that's our safari lodge. Our travel site is fandftravel.com. It's also spelled out with the AND, FANDF travel. Or if they want to chat to me personally, they can head over to my website, sarahhdusek.com.
And we'll link to all of those in the show notes. Sarah, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you, taking the time to chat. Thank you for sharing your time with us here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.